The Lord be with you. It is good to be with you this morning. Let us try that again as we're still waking up. The Lord be with you. There we go. I've heard that there's coffee being made in the kitchen, so go get yourself a cup. We are so excited this morning to be welcoming Rabbi John Spitzer, and we're going to go ahead and start in just another minute. We've got with the new camera system and power, we've got all sorts of things we've got to make sure just so. So we're finalizing all those, getting everything set. We'll go ahead and start in just another minute.
Hello.
Okay, how do you feel?
Help me get this thing.
Sure,
It's on. It's on.
Do you need anything else from me?
I don't, well, your affection and friendship is helpful.
You are on and ready to go.
Thank you.
Great.
They still don't have coffee out there.
No.
Would you like a table, John?
What?
Coffee.
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure.
Blocking. Thank you.
I'm helping.
Do you need it at all?
I guess I could brew it, you know, that would be the smartest thing.
Okay. Super.
I think.
And then when you're ready, the right arrow can advance, and then the red here is also.
Laser. Very good. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'll just welcome us and then turn things over to you.
All right.
Once again, let's try this again. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
I see some people got some coffee around the room. Great. So we are, as I said a moment ago, I'll say again for our friends at home, we are so excited to be here gathered together for Westminster. This is now our third week of the Saints and Sinners course. A couple of weeks ago, Rabbi Adlen came. This week, we are so excited to welcome Rabbi Spitzer. Then next week, Rabbi David Komorowski is coming to teach us even yet more about some saints and some holy folks and streams of Judaism, helping us understand, looking over the fence and having that holy envy, which we've talked about. It's been a little while, but holy envy. What's going on in Judaism? What can we learn for our lives? So lots of things. I'm very excited to welcome John this morning, and I'll turn things over to him.
Thank you. Oh, I've got this. When I first started coming down to CPC, I was a much younger man, and I didn't reach for microphones when I was already mic'd. What can I tell you? A little bit of preliminary stuff. First of all, I brought a friend with me, Dr. Larry Cohn. Where are you, Larry? When I first started coming down to CPC, I was able to see Larry back there. It's not so easy anymore. Dr. Cohn is a good friend of mine and actually of ours. He's been involved in a number of activities through the temple that have really enriched our lives, not the least of which is our working with Habitat for Humanity. I wear this because this afternoon we are dedicating 3 homes of the interfaith build. I think there were 16 or 17 different faith congregations that were involved in building 3 homes side by side. I wear this not only because I think I might have to say something this afternoon. Silly people said keep it to a minute. But because activities like that, where Jews work with Catholics and Protestants and Muslims, and activities like this where you bring in people of different faiths and have an opportunity to learn from them, talk with them, question them, and so on and so forth, are really, I think they are steps along the Messianic pathway, and that's really very, very important. Pastor Wallace, what time do we have to be out of here?
10:15.
10:15. Well, I might be able to do that. Maybe. So that's why I'm dressed the way I am, and I was able to do my little advertisement. I know Pastor Wallace said that he has promoted the Habitat program, but he doesn't have building skills. Just because I have all of my fingers doesn't mean I have building skills. It's a wonderful activity to be involved with. Not only, thank you so much. I'm waiting for the steak. a wonderful activity to be involved in. So you're now in the process of talking about saints and sinners. Rabbi Adlen came and spoke to you about the saints. What does that leave me? Rabbi Komarovsky will come and say, forgive them both. We have a unique congregation where we have a sitting rabbi who's young as my son, and we have two emeriti, Rabbi Adlen and myself, and we're going to do a little renovation project at Temple Israel. We're going to put a balcony in the sanctuary where we'll have an opportunity for Rabbi Adlen and myself to be Waldorf and Statler, and we will... It's a wonderful bit of collegiality, the best collegiality I've ever had in my life. So you'll enjoy meeting Rabbi Komarovsky. I know he is interested in the possibility of sharing the Israel trip with you when Christ Presbyterian returns to Israel. I hope that goes. It was such a magnificent experience for us. Okay. How many of you were here for Rabbi Adlen's presentation? Okay. So when you were here and he made his presentation, you learned about First Temple Judaism, and you learned about how that temple was destroyed, rebuilt, and then the incursion of Rome at a time in which not only Roman power was there, but Greek philosophy and so many different streams of philosophical input were happening in that small land of Judea. And then you heard about the destruction of the second, well, it's really, yeah, I guess you'd call it the second temple, because we're now, the second temple. And with that, there arose a class of people that we now formally call the rabbis. And these rabbis had the challenge of making the transition between a temple cultic religion, where people would come 3 times a year or more for national sacrifices. We just finished Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. A major part of the Yom Kippur service, the Day of Atonement service, was remembering that big sacrifice on the afternoon of Yom Kippur when they took 2 goats and sent one off into the wilderness and sacrificed the other one. Great pageantry, very formal. People came from all over to be there for that. Well, when that temple was destroyed and there was no place for the Kohanim, the priests, to offer sacrifices anymore, there needed to be either a bridge or some readaptation of religious life. You know that one of those readaptations turned out to be Christianity. The early church was really a Jewish church and came into being really for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which was it took root because of the absence of the temple, and then it spread out through the Roman Empire. Very nice. But what did the Jews do? Well, Rabbi Adlen explained to you that these early rabbis began to collect the wisdom of their teachers and put them together in the first codified book of Jewish rabbinic literature called the Mishnah, around the beginning of the 3rd century of the Common Era, right around 200. And then the rabbis began to comment on the Mishnah, ask questions of the text. Why did this rabbi say that? What did he mean by that? Isn't there a conflict between these 2 rabbis, and so on and so forth? And they added to that, and what they added they called the Gemara, the conclusion. And when they put Mishnah and Gemara together on the same page, we came out with something called Talmud. So Talmud, when you look at a page of Talmud, in the central column, you are looking at written literature for perhaps 5 or 6 centuries. And then, of course, once that's done, they begin to write commentary on the text, which talks about Torah. And that process, friends, is still going on today. When you buy a classic edition of the Talmud, one of the newest and most exciting is the Steinsaltz Talmud. First of all, it's kind of filet. It doesn't give you every single argument and word, but what it does do is it gives you a literal translation of the text, which is really shorthand, and then it gives you an explanation of the text, which is really important. And it gives you all the study material and notes around about it. So if you really want to take a deep dive into a deep ocean, then you might want to take a look at the Steinsaltz Talmud. But my suggestion to you is that you borrow a copy first. Don't buy it first. $75 a volume, and it's a beautiful book. After about the 6th or 7th century, you now have Jews dispersed through what is today Europe and so on and so forth, and a deep focus on Talmudic literature. As you get into the 17th century, you begin to see Jews involved in an awful lot of persecution, subjugation, being legally walled off from the community, not being citizens, a lot of poverty. It's that old shtetl that you saw when you saw Fiddler on the Roof, except it was muddier, smellier, and poorer. It is into that period of time when Jews in Central Europe and Eastern Europe were probably at the zenith of their suffering that the Hasidic movement begins. And so I've entitled my presentation, As der Rebbe singt, Singen alle Hasidim. Anybody speak Yiddish here? Do you speak a little German? It means, as the Rebbe sings, sing all you Hasidim. And the subtitle is, the early Hasidim, with a daf of the Stroimel, to the Baal Shem Tov, the Breslaver, and others. Wait a minute. What's a Stroimel? Anybody know what a Stroimel is? Ha ha ha, I knew I'd get you. It's what? It's a hotel. That's a Stroimel. You recognize, you see pictures of Hasidim, you have an image in your mind of who the Hasidim are. They very often wear these fur hats and frock coats with rope belts. Often they have white stockings and black shoes. And they all look the same because it's kind of like a uniform. But if you look closely, each uniform for each group of Hasidim is slightly different. You have some Boy Scouts who wear one kind of uniform and some who have another kind. It might be the difference of just a patch. It might be a difference of a shirt. But there are a whole bunch of different uniforms that the Hasidim wear. And what I'm going to do, I always do this. I make a copy here so that I can follow what's up on this screen, and then I neglect to look at one or the other. What I hope to do today is I hope to talk about only 4 of what are many different elements of Hasidut. A Hasid is a righteous person, Hasidim is a group of Hasids, and Hasidut is the philosophy, the theology of the Hasidim, okay? I'm going to take a look at the concept or the principle of simcha, of joy. And this is going to be an initial concept which we'll talk about, and it is a spiritual approach that was popularized by the Baal Shem Tov, by the Besht. We'll talk about him in a moment. Then we're going to talk about dveikut, which means cleaving or clinging to God. Dveikut isn't just hanging on. I'm going to fall, I'm going to hang on. It is an embrace that is eternal, okay? And we're going to talk about that, which will really help us understand this whole concept of an immanent God, which has a real aspect of mindfulness. Many people today know about mindfulness. It's a very popular philosophy, mindfulness. People make a lot of money out of helping you do what you can do on your own. Then we're going to talk about bitul yesh, which means nullifying the ego. It's actually, bitul means to nullify or to make nothing, and yesh means the it is. Nullifying the isness. And that is from the Kotzker Rebbe. And then I put down there making room for a very important reason, and you'll see later. And the last one is hitlavut, which is lahav, or lav means to be inflamed. And hitlavut is a kind of rapture. And we're going to take a look at some material of Martin Buber when he talked about I and thou. As we go through, you're going to see some different spellings of things. The Rabbi of Breslav, I'm going to call the Bratslaver. Because it's a foreign language and you can do whatever you want with that. The term Rebbe sometimes will be R-E-B-B-E, sometimes it'll be R-E-B-E because I forgot to put extra B. Sometimes it will be Reb, R-E-B. Once in a while, perhaps R-A-V, Rav. Rav means rabbi. But we distinguish the Rebbe from a traditional rabbi, and you'll see why, because of a conflict between the Hasidim and the Talmudic Jews. So we're going to try to take a look at those four principles, utilizing four different individuals, and we'll have a little music involved in this. We'll have a little opportunity for you to take a look at some quotations and figure out which you like and why and share that. Oh, it's going to be so much fun. So here is the story of Reb Israel ben Eliezer, the Baal Shem Tov. And you'll notice we call him also the Besht, which is, in fact, you said that I can push a little red thing and make it a pointer. Look at that. I lost it. I can't see it. The B of Baal, which means master, the Sh of Shem, which is the name, and the T of Tov means the Besht. So it's an acronym that helps us remember who Israel ben Eliezer was. The Baal Shem Tov was a late 17th, early 18th century rabbi, and he was known as the Baal Shem Tov, meaning the master of the good name. Literally, that's what it literally means. When you look at it in terms of the idiom, it could mean simply he had a great reputation. You know, you have a good name, you have a great reputation. But it also meant the master of God's name, which was used for working miracles. The Baal Shem Tov had an attribute as a miracle worker. And he was a teacher and a healer in Poland, and he's regarded as the founder of the movement and movements that we know as Hasidism. He had very humble beginnings. He was orphaned at an early age, and by the way, married at an early age. And he began by making his living sort of as a Polish crossing guard. He would help the children go to school. They'd gather up large groups of kids, and they would walk through the woods and on the mud paths, and he would take them to Cheder, which was school. And on the way to Cheder, he would tell them stories about God's presence, about the power of the deity in the woods, and so on and so forth. And he would sing them songs. And they would learn that it was really fun to be with him, fun to talk about God, fun to feel God's presence, and fun to go to school. That's at least what the literature suggests. I wasn't one of those kids, but it could be otherwise. And at a time of great poverty and trial in this area of Poland, it was a situation in which his approach was very helpful. And I'll tell you in a moment why that was done. Actually, I think my slides are a little out of order here, and that's my fault. Well, we'll get to it in a moment. People used to follow the Baal Shem Tov. Come on. Come on. Michael. 2 buttons and I screwed it up. Thank you, Michael. The Baal Shem Tov had a kind of cultic following. He was a charismatic leader. And this Yiddish folk song, which we started out here, Az the Rebbe Zing, is an example, not necessarily from the Baal Shem Tov, but it was an example of how the Rebbe was exalted. I know that your pastors here are well-respected, well-educated, active people, but the Rebbe was the center of the circle. His charisma placed him at the center of his congregation, and people hung on his words. So what would happen is this song was created, and I'll tell you a little more about it later, because it's not exactly what it appears to be, which talked about people adulating the rabbi or the Rebbe so that they would do what the Rebbe did. You can see the lyrics to the song, which I will see here because I can see it better. Az the Rebbe singt, singen alle Chassidim. When the rabbi or the Rebbe sings, all the Chassidim sing. And when the Rebbe when he dances, all the Chassidim dance. And when he schlaf, all the Chassidim schlaf, they all sleep. And when he laughs, all the Chassidim laugh. And when he eats, all the Chassidim eat. And finally, when he speaks, all the Chassidim listen. That's the power of the Rebbe amongst his followers, his disciples. Michael, I lost him. Oh, there he is. He was going to put in a clip. I don't know if it's not the next slide. Is that slide? There was going to be a YouTube video.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, but I don't think I can get it to. Just for your information, the Rebbe is the one in black. Let's watch it for a moment or two. It's called a traveling step. Oh, there's some more Hasidim there. Everybody got to have some. Funny. That's probably enough. So what you saw there, you saw a number of things. First of all, they all look alike. They're all wearing the uniform. They're all a part of, that happens to be the Babover Rebbe. They all look like the Babover Hasidim. That's first. That's part of the mitzvah dance for a wedding, obviously. And the bride was in white. But you also got a sense of the unity of the people. And it's a different kind of joy than you see at weddings today. Okay? I think the Babover Rebbe was having a hell of a good time. But you get a sense today about how the music and the dance are very, very important. It's not just entertainment. It's more than that. So now we're going to come to the conflict that I was telling you about. When the Baal Shem Tov came to be and he began to talk about finding God through joy, through the immersive experience in nature, through finding God as an immanent being, very close to us. One of the things that he did was he said there is an alternative route to meeting God besides the study of Talmud. The church knows this very well. The Catholic Church knew it very, very well. An educated clergy in the Catholic Church back in the day really had an advantage over the average peasant, because the average peasant couldn't read, couldn't read the Bible, and was made distant. They did not have access to where the faith's meaning came from. In fact, the Protestant Reformation, a lot of it had to do with that, spreading that knowledge and experience to many people. Well, what happened when the Baal Shem Tov came to be, he said, most of us are working all the time just to put food on the table and keep oil in the lamp and so on and so forth. And life is difficult for us and we can't go to the yeshiva and we can't study all day and all that sort of stuff. How do we get close to God? He says there's another route. And the other route is through joy. Well, you can imagine that was pretty threatening to the rabbis at the academies in Vilna, for example. Vilna is one of the great Talmudic centers. Today it's called Vilnius. One of the classic editions of Talmud came out of Vilna because that's where the scholars went. One of the places where they would go, it was the Harvard of Poland and the Ukraine area. So there arose two groups of people. The people who followed that philosophy of the Hasidim, which was not anti-legal or anti-scholarship, but really saw another way to get to God, and people who felt that the pinnacle, the quintessential activity of Jewish life was the study of Jewish law. The people who felt that the quintessential act of Judaism was studying Jewish law became known as the misnagdim or the mitnagdim, the opposers. They were the rabbis, the scholars, the professors, and so on and so forth, who opposed this upstart philosophy of poor people, of common folks, which was so engaging and attractive. So there was kind of a political religious divide there. And the conflict between the mitnagdim and the Hasidim at times actually grew to blows. They would have fights, fist fights, and so on. And you can see, I think, the appeal of the Hasidim. The thing that I can give you an example of is we both Presbyterians and Jews come from you know, a sort of traditional European, American kind of formula. We come to services and things are ordered, and, you know, when Pastor DeVries gets up and gives his sermon, you go, and when Michael Wallace does his readings, and it's really very, very nice. And when we pass the plate, we go, Well, here are people who got together and they danced and they sang and they ate well and they had a good time. You can see the appeal. So the comparison between my synagogue and your church is when we happen to go and visit a black church, an African American church. It's very strange. They do something very different there, but all of a sudden we find our foot tapping. And maybe we'll get up, because it's very engaging. So the misnagdim or the mitnagdim were nervous about this and really caused the Hasidim to become their own movement. So now I'm going to show you some contemporary Hasidic Rebbes. This is the Satmar Rebbe. Satmar Rebbe here in the United States. Okay, why did they come here? Because Hitler decimated the Hasidic communities. So these are not emigres and immigrants. These are refugees who took flight to save their lives. So the Satmar Rebbe has one group of Hasidim, the Babover Rebbe, and he was the one who was doing the doing the singing. Here we have the Ger Rebbe. And here we have probably one of the most famous Rebbes, which was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Schneerson, who was the head of the Lubavitch Hasidim. You'll notice they all look strangely similar, but all somewhat different. And they all had their following. He turns the pages. So we're going to take a look at 4 or 5 Hasidic figures, and we're going to talk about, you know, what did they teach, because they were each in their own way very, very different. The first one we're going to look at is the Breslaver. Some people call him Rabbi Nachman of Breslav. And he was an 18th century, 19th century Rebbe. He was the great-grandson of the Besh, so he inherited the tradition of the Baal Shem Tov. And remember, these Hasidic groups were really dynastic. If you could hand it off to your son or to a close relative or perhaps a son-in-law, that's how the dynasty worked usually. And he was born in Mezherbezh in the Ukraine. I love this quotation. Reb Nachman said, "The world has yet to taste what I have to offer. Were they to hear just one of my teachings together with its proper melody and dance, the incredible delight would bring everyone, everything to a state of pure ecstasy and total transcendence of self." Notice what he puts in there. It is the rational, the words, but then there is the song and the dance. So those 3 elements bring forth the message. It's very, very important. Again, Christ Presbyterian knows a little bit about this because you have a very rich musical tradition. And the musical tradition isn't just entertainment, although it's very entertaining. The musical tradition helps you understand the message. And then one of the books I brought is this book called The Empty Chair. You see the picture of it up there. And these are the sayings of the Reb Nachman of Breslav. And the empty chair is a very significant chair. when Reb Nachman died, before Reb Nachman died, one of his Hasidim, I think I have this on the next page. Yeah, the chair. One of his Hasidim made this chair for him. It took him half a year to make this chair by hand. It was really a very nice chair. And when he died, there was no one to take his place, so the chair was empty. When the Cossacks rose up against the Jews again, the chair was taken apart and moved to Jerusalem. And you can see the chair today. There's nobody sitting in it. They're waiting for a suitable replacement for the Rebbe. Uh-oh. Ah, there it is. So now we're going to look at Reb Nachman's thought. Reb Nachman encouraged his followers to strive to become tzaddikim, righteous people, through fierce devotion to God, whereas the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, and had focused more on God's immanence, meaning God's closeness, as God is in everything. Reb Nachman emphasized the struggle to feel close to God. The Breslav Chasids, I can't read very well, objective was to immerse himself in his pain. Because remember, life was difficult. And you had to deal with life is difficult. You want to hear how difficult it was? There was a book out, and I forget the author. I just finished reading it, called The Slaughterman's Daughter. It's a story of the daughter of a sheichet, of a ritual slaughter in the Pale of Jewish settlement, and from the shtetl. And it's a very convoluted story, but it tells you how difficult life was in the shtetl. So Reb Nachman became famous for saying, it is a great mitzvah to be joyous constantly. This place of deep pain, which he thought of as a kind of void, was devoid of language, which is why he popularized or developed the nigun. So I've asked Pastor Michael if he would please learn a nigun for us, which you might catch on to. You heard a little bit of it when you saw the mitzvah dance.
La, 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 that one?
Whatever, pick a nigun. But try not to move. It's hard not to move with a nigun.
Check. Okay. This is the Luba Victor, I think. But here we go. So nigun is a wordless melody, and this one goes like this. La 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 Why don't you join him? La 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la la la. Ya la 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 la. La 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la la la. La 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 la. I could see a couple of feet going like this. I know it was hard not to, but a couple were going like this. Could you imagine if that would happen in your sanctuary? A song without words that conveys, in this case, joy,
We use it at temple with a finishing on it. With the finishing is hallelujah, 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 and everybody gets involved. It's really very, very nice. Thank you, Pastor Michael. We will call him back, and then you can throw money at him when it's all over. So let's take a look at some of what the Breslaver said. For Reb Nachman, living in tune meant awareness. Remember we talked about mindfulness? Living in tune meant awareness, being aware of the transient nature of this world and the eternity of the next. And here's a story about Reb Nachman. From his window, facing the marketplace, he saw one of his disciples running by. "Have you looked up at the sky this morning?" Reb Nachman asked. "No, Rebbe, I haven't had time." "Believe me, in 50 years, everything you see here now will be gone. There will be a different market, other horses and wagons and people. I won't be here, and neither will you. So what's so important that you haven't got time to look up at the sky?" It's kind of a mindfulness, a simplicity of what he had to say. Now, here are four sayings, he said many more things, but here are four sayings of Reb Nachman. I'm going to read them slowly, and I'm going to ask you to, in your mind, pick a saying that somehow captures you, either because it expresses your understanding nicely of a certain insight, or it's an approach you didn't originally have. Whatever the reason, sort of fixate on that. Everything in this world, whatever is and whatever happens, is a test designed to give you freedom of choice. Choose wisely. Be the kind of person who makes fulfilling physical needs a spiritual experience. Whenever possible, avoid eating in a hurry. Even at home, don't gobble up food. Eating is an act of holiness. It requires full presence of mind. The highest peace is peace between opposites. If you remember this, when you run into someone who makes you uncomfortable, instead of heading for the exit, you'll find ways for the two of you to get along. Someone tell me which one of those four perhaps captured your imagination. Please.
The last one.
This is good because I'm going to make him run all the way over here.
The last one grabbed me. Can you imagine how wonderful this world would be if everyone let everyone else in and listened to them and found a way to get along? That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Over here we had another selection. Please. Same thing.
But also the second one.
We'll talk about the second one, would you?
So the second one, I've started to become involved with the food and clothing ministry. And I was here on Wednesday for our health fair, and it was truly a spiritual experience to help provide for physical needs, either through medical advice or through a can of soup or a box of ramen noodles.
Anybody else want to share an idea? Oh, right here, Michael.
Well, I would agree with when you're taking care of someone who you don't know how they feel about it, like they can't respond. Sometimes when you take your time and you are present, you realize that there's a connection there, even if they can't answer you or respond to you. Like an older person or a child or somebody who's very disabled.
The other thing that the Breslaver did, I think, is he said, there is no action in the world that you do. I'm not being crass, even going to the bathroom, that you can't find sanctity and holiness in. Okay, I'm really running out of time, so I apologize for that. I'm going to ask Michael to sing one more song for us, because this, I think, is one of the most profound teachings of the Breslaver. It's a very existential kind of a song. Kol ha'olam kulo, all of the world, gesher tsar me'od, is a very narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar, and the fundamental principle, lo lefached klal, is not to be afraid at all.
Let's try that again. Here we go. Kol ha'olam kulo kesher tsar me'od, kesher tsar me'od, kesher tsar me'od. Kol ha'olam kulo kesher tsar me'od, kesher tsar me'od.
Here comes the Hasidic part.
והעיקר לא לפחד, לא לפחד כלל. והעיקר לא לפחד כלל.
I need the time.
You need the time.
Thank you very much. So it starts out, the world is a narrow bridge. There's so much to be fearful here. You step to the left, you go to hell. You step to the right, you're on the same track. But the fundamental principle is, don't be afraid. It's a beautiful song, I think, and it expresses very well. I'm going to run quickly through the other people here because I know I was told I've only got 3 more minutes, which is never enough time. So we're now going to look at Menachem Mendel of Kotz, the Kotzker Rebbe, 18th century to early 19th century rabbi. The Kotzker Rebbe was also in Poland. Take a look at the saying, one saying of his that's in the black box. You see his picture. People are accustomed to look at the heavens and to wonder what happens there. It would be better if they would look within themselves to see what happens there. Pointing oneself inward. Here are some sayings of the Kotzker you can do on your own, the 4 sayings. There is nothing more whole than a broken heart. That's one of my favorite sayings. It's like saying that someone who is a tzaddik, who does everything right, has to take a second seat to a penitent sinner. A tzaddik has not had the experience of being a sinner who is repentant and forgiven. So there is nothing as whole as a broken heart. Do not be satisfied with speech of your lips and the thought of your heart, all the promises and good sayings in your mouth, and all the good thoughts in your heart. Rather, you must arise and do. There is very much of an action orientation to all of Judaism, and that's what the Kotzker is saying here. Very important. God is only where you let him in. Now, people usually read that thinking, well, you have to open the door. You have to say, okay, God, you can come in. But what he's really saying is you have to deflate your ego, because even with an open door, you could fill all of the space. I remember looking at a cartoon years ago about Fat Albert. He would walk into a door and fill the door. You couldn't get through. Well, our egos are the biggest doorway, the biggest block to God's presence. When a man makes a reverent face before a face that is no face, that is idol worship. And I talk a lot about that, but it takes too long. And Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote a wonderful series, two-volume series on the prophets, said that while the Besht was a populist and kind. In Kotsk, the fervor was elitist and harsh. He said in Mezhebush, which was the home of the Baal Shem Tov, there was light, but in Kotsk, there was fire. Kotsk demanded constant tension and unmitigated militancy in combating egocentricity. And that's that God only can enter where we are small enough. We don't block God's entrance by our own feelings. We're going to skip the story of Nebuchadnezzar, and we're going to go to something contemporary, the Chabad Lubavitch. The Chabad Lubavitch were started by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi in Poland in the 18th century. It was a dynastic group of people which found its way to Borough Park and so on in New York after the war. And you can see that Chabad is actually a mnemonic that stands for Chachma, meaning wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Dea, which is religious understanding or insight. And this was a missionizing program or an outreach program, not to non-Jews, but to Jews. For those of you who may have been to Israel, when you walk up to the Western Wall, you'll find that there are a bunch of people there who encourage you to put on phylacteries or to make a blessing. They're not looking to make Presbyterians Jews. They're looking to make Jews Jews. So they are renowned for having Chabad centers all over the world, so that when you're trekking in Kathmandu, when it comes to Shabbos, you can find a place at their table. Martin Buber, an existentialist of our century, also was raised in a Misnagdim family, in a Haredi family, which didn't like these Hasidim, but he then studied Hasidut and became a philosopher as well. And his neo-Hasidic thought is very, very popular. The most popular part of his thought was written down in a book called I and Thou. And you may remember, give me just 3 more minutes, then we'll be finished. 1 more minute? No, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Thank you very much. What is I and Thou about? Buber thought that life was dialogic. You don't live life on your own. You live life in dialogue with other things and beings. Most of the time, we have I-it relationships. I am the subject, and the it is the predicate or the object. And we have that with things, you know. I do habitat, and I have a power screwdriver. And it's I and it, and the it works for me, and I use it that way. When I go to the dentist can be an it. That means that the dentist is the one who accomplishes things for me. I use the dentist as a tool. But if I really face someone, and I really open myself up, reduce my own ego, and have commerce with, dialogue with, the it becomes a thou, becomes another subject. And people are fond of saying you could have an I-thou relationship with a tree. And what happens when you have an I-thou relationship? Husbands and wives, think about this. Theoretically, during lovemaking, there is a moment in which 2 people, we even said, become one. They both have a relationship with another subject. And when that happens, they merge into one. As following that analogy, one of the things that happens is as soon as you have it and know you've had it, you're back to separated again. But in that merging together, you see this sort of neo-Hasidic idea of God's immanence, of God's presence. And you can have that with a person, with an animal, with a vegetable, with a thing. So I say he's an existentialist with a side of transcendentalism, if you please. So friends, I think that's it. I think I've done it. Yeah, if you want to see some text that I used, those are some texts that I used. I have a long quote from Martin Buber here, which I have no time to do. But some good books like The Way into Jewish Mystical Tradition. I've used this before with you. God was in this place and I did not know it. Great Jewish quotes, because when you don't have time to do a lot of research, it's right there. And The Empty Chair, which is about the Breslav Rebbe. So friends, thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it very, very much.
And thank you, Rabbi Spitzer, for your presence. And my goodness, we could say another hour. I don't know about you, but I learned a lot, and always love it when you come. So thank you so much. As we go off to worship, let us be inspired that no matter who they are, there are men and women around the world who are seeking after God, and we can learn something from their experiences and the wonderful quotes we've learned today. We've got a lot, we've got our hearts filled, and let us continue in that as we head off to worship. The Lord be with you.